Yes, yes, yes. Hey, Ben.
Hello.
Hello.
I actually had a question that you might be able to answer.
Try me.
So I noticed on the calendar, it says this meeting happens every 2 weeks, but looking at the meeting notes or the agenda, it looks like it happens every week. Which is it?
It's both. I can show you. I can show you.
Okay.
So if we bring up the calendar, I can share my screen right away.
All right. Cool.
Where is it? There is. Yeah. So you see my sharing there, I guess.
Yeah.
So we have this meeting on Tuesdays
Mm-hmm.
in the afternoons, but then we have a complementary or additional, I would say, meeting on Wednesdays every other week, which is in a more Asia Pacific time frame friendly time.
Oh,
So
okay.
both of
So
these are actually for the CDEvents work group. They are not named exactly the same.
okay.
I believe they use the same Zoom link. I think so. So both of these are intended to be project work group meetings, so to say, working on the actual spec.
I see. Okay, cool.
Then we have the Monday SIG meetings, which is related, but more handling the administrative stuff on the SIG itself and not exactly on the vocabulary parts.
Okay, nice.
That's the reason.
All right, cool. That makes way more sense then.
Okay.
All right, thank you for that.
Perfect. So let's see, has anyone else joined so far?
Yeah, I think I just saw Eric join.
I'm here.
Hey, Eric.
You
nice to see you. And thanks again for your presentation last Friday, Eric. It was great.
Yeah, thanks.
Yep.
I've been trying to look for a recording. Some of the other tracks were recorded in some virtual platform, but I haven't seen ours there, so I'm not sure what's going on there.
Is it already published in YouTube or?
No, I don't think so. Some of the talks were published almost immediately on some sort of virtual platform for the conference, but I haven't seen our talk there.
On the Accelerate platform that I guess, or CDEvents, I guess it is called.
Ah, yes, because that's how you saw it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I saw it virtually here in this platform.
So,
is it possible to?
For some of the breakout sessions.
But it was called something else, not breakout sessions, I believe.
Interesting. Maybe I've been looking in the wrong place then, because a lot of the talks are listed here in the breakout sessions, but not ours, as far as I can see.
Okay, let's see. What did we have? Did it say Dora in the title or something?
You can search for DevOps, or maybe you get 1 million hits if you search for DevOps.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe. Yeah, more or less 1 million, or no, not really.
Oh, that's sorry.
Here it is.
Okay, so now it is up.
The talk is there, but I don't know if there is a recording.
There is a view recording button to the top right if you scroll back.
Yeah, sure, there it is.
Yeah.
Everyone in the meeting here who didn't catch the actual live presentation by Eric and Andrea, you are free to go in here if you have access to this platform. I guess you might need to be registered for the event to get access to this platform. So that might not help too many of you anyway. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure it will be posted on YouTube hopefully soon.
Hopefully, yes.
So, and Eric, when talking about that, did you get any comments or questions or discussions based on your presentation? Because the stream I watched just quit directly when your presentation was done without waiting for any questions or anything.
Oh, that's a shame. Yeah, there were some questions in the room. I don't remember off the top of my head exactly what they were about. But there were some people who showed some interest, and we said that we would be happy to talk to you, and please come on one of our meetings and introduce what you are doing. Maybe Andrea, if he joins today, can remember more exactly of what people were talking about. I sort of blanked out, I guess, after the presentation.
Okay, yeah. No, Andrea just wrote in the chat, unfortunately, half an hour ago that he won't be able to join today. So he will not be here.
Yeah.
He has prepared the agenda, but he won't be here himself. So I can actually remove him. He probably added this himself there before actually knowing that he needed to leave. I can replace him with me instead. let's see. So we who are on the call might be the ones who will stay on the call then, I assume. So I wasn't really prepared to drive this today, but since Andrea is not here, I'll do my best to see if we can at least go through the agenda that Andrea prepared, and then see where we end up. So we can see, we had the, let's see, Dorametrics, DMO. Should we note something from that then, or some questions raised, but, or I don't know. What was the audience? How large audience was it on your presentation? Were there any people still there on the conference Friday afternoon?
Yeah, I think it was like 8 or 10 or something. So not a massive audience, but given that this was Friday afternoon after a week's long conference, it's pretty decent, I think.
Yeah. Quite a small audience then.
Mm.
And I have no idea how many was there virtually, because I couldn't see how many more people were watching. And I don't think that feature exists in that platform. That you can see.
No, the only thing I could see was that 16 people had somehow registered for the talk in the virtual platform, but that doesn't mean that 16 people were watching, of course. But
so not too many there either then.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. So unless anyone else has any other ideas,
I do remember one other questions now, which is something that we have discussed before, and that was like, well, two questions were, one, is anyone running this in production? And to that, the answer is no. We haven't gotten that far yet. We are mainly doing proof of concepts. And the other question was like, how do we get the big players on board with this? Or how will people start using it? And I think me and Andrea answered basically, which we have discussed before as well. There are two ways we can go about this, or two ways in parallel that we are going to go about this. One is native inclusion of sending CDEvents and receiving CDEvents in existing products like Jenkins plugins and things like that. And the other is translations, where we just hook onto whatever signals are sent by other larger platforms and translate them into CDEvents and then pass them forward.
Right.
Yeah, but those things we have already discussed in this forum before, as far as I'm aware. Go ahead, Ben.
Oh, yeah. So I was going to say that I know we talked about headers, I don't know, like a few meetings ago, but I actually wanted to revisit that at some point, because I know Andrea switched back from binary mode to this bag, like grab bag type. But this kind of has to pertain to your comment about getting big players. And I talked a little bit to Andrea about this, but I think in order to get someone that is of enterprise level, like of someone like like Apple, us for instance, or like AWS, that's where I was previously working at. You would need to pass these as headers. I don't know what that would look like still, because you guys do require a lot of metadata. But the main issue for this is that if you're touching payloads, it's going to be a pretty big deal for these type of companies, unless like you have a translation layer in front of every service that's sending, as well as every service that's receiving, which I think would be really difficult to do. But yeah, like I said, I'll be more open to that discussion. But yeah, that's kind of like the issue that I currently see with getting the major players right now, is you can't touch the payload.
No, and I don't see that necessarily as the goal of the CDEvents project, to replace whatever internal signaling existing players have between their products. That's not really our goal. Our goal is to promote interoperability between different vendors, and also to promote observability. So we don't, to me, it's not super important that people or big actors start replacing the things they are already doing with CDEvents. To me, it's sufficient if they add CDEvents. If they want to claim to be interoperable, or if they want to claim to have observability, then they should be sending CDEvents. And it's
but that's the issue though. If you're touching the payload, they will never adopt it. Honestly, like that's the biggest, and that's why I wanted to go to headers, is because if you say, okay, these are now in headers, you don't touch the payload, they'd be more willing to add it on top of it, and I get your statement of like being additive, but like I said, touching the payload is a huge deal for these companies.
Yeah, I think I didn't make myself clear. I'm not even saying touch the payload. I'm saying send CDEvents. And you can do that separately through a separate channel. You can leave whatever payload you have today completely untouched and just send CDEvents as well.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
That's like, yeah, that's one way of doing it. Because if it is the case, as you say, that the structure and format of this payload is extremely important, then that means that someone else is relying on that payload looking exactly that way. And that means that we would then be trying to replace something with CDEvents, which I don't think is one of, at least it's not a goal that is particularly important to me. To me, it's important that people who want to do interoperability and observability can start to see CDEvents produced by bigger actors. And we can do that either by getting those actors to produce CDEvents natively or through translation layers. And it doesn't matter to me if those translation layers sort of destroy the payload so that it cannot be received by whoever was receiving the old payload, because that solution already works. We don't need to use CDEvents for that. So roughly in that, that's how my thinking, or my personal thinking goes right now.
No, and that makes sense. Maybe I'll talk to you maybe more in Slack to kind of give you kind of like hash this out, and kind of figure out like what maybe the best approach is, because I need like another opinionated someone that's kind of against this idea to kind of really flesh it out, right? Because right now, like because I have proposed the spec, some people that I've worked with at Amazon as well as internally here at Apple, and the biggest concern that they've had so far has been touching on this payload. But like you said, if you're saying, oh, maybe you send it as a separate channel, I'm curious. Like I said, that's kind of interesting, but like I'm curious what that would look like though. Because now like every endpoint needs like a duplicate, right? So yeah, like I said, we can hash it out, and then maybe we can kind of figure out like a good solution for this, and then kind of go from there if that works for you.
Absolutely. That sounds like a good discussion for me as well, because I think there is some use cases that I don't understand that you have much more insight into, Ben. So sorry, Tracy, you were saying.
Yeah, I'm curious, it's easy to say that somebody is concerned about touching the payload. What are they concerned about? Can you kind of dumb it down for me and explain to me what their core concerns are?
Yeah. So both from my experience, both Apple and AWS is a very is a very non-breaking change type of company. So like any service that you have is going to work basically forever for all customers. So changing the payload is a huge break of that contract. And then getting like now if you're sending extra data with that payload as well, and you send that along, the biggest issue there is just kind of like missing, like for instance, like if I send it like service A to service B, right, that data would get dropped in the payload, and then you go to service C, that they lose all that data, but let's say they support it, but with headers you can pass headers along. So, just by like typically a flag, you can just say, just pass these headers along. So the barrier to entry is a lot lower than now changing all these models saying, oh, now support this new bag type. And so, like I said, the barrier entry is a lot lower to support something to pass along to multiple services, and as well as it being not a breaking change potentially as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I still don't get it. Sorry. I understand the concept of, you don't want to, if you have data that you're passing, you want to continue it.
Yes.
And I totally get that. And maybe we should make sure we're passing all the data that anybody would use.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah,
I'm really struggling with really understanding the core pain point, other than missing data. Is there some other security concern, or is it purely just we're missing data? And how would a header change that?
Well, no, I'm saying like
the data is still missing.
No. I said that's where I was explaining that the barrier of entry is different, right? To pass a header along is a lot easier than changing every model in your code base. Like, like we work in a code base, like, where it's like hundreds of thousands of lines of code, and we have, hundreds of thousands of models, like request models, response models. Do you expect us to change every class to have this bag, right? Like, instead, it's easier for us just to say, hey, pass these headers along, right? For these type of companies. But then
you would need to add those headers to all those calls in all of your parts of the source code instead, and in a lot of different places in the code. I'm more thinking in that scenario that you should have some kind of service that listens to those messages that are already sent and just translate the relevant ones with the relevant data to CDEvents as a one single standalone thing then. And then
I think that's what Eric
onto another message bus or message broker.
Yeah, I think that's what Eric was kind of alluding to. But passing headers along, we don't have to change that. Like, basically, I guess it depends to company, but in our, for instance, back at AWS, we could say just pass these headers along from service to service, and it's that easy to just to populate those through. But with models, for instance, that's a lot more difficult for us. And then the biggest thing for us, also, as you alluded to, Tracy, is security. Like having something touch the payload, especially for some of our services, that's a huge, that's going to be a no. That's not going to happen within Apple, to be honest. So security is also a very big issue, but also breaking changes, because we don't know, unless, we don't know what's going to be happening to that payload. I mean, you could say what you're doing with it, but if you change any structure of it and it breaks any customers, that's a huge issue for any of these companies, right? Because AWS adheres to contracts, saying, hey, this is what we're sending, this is what you're receiving. And if that ever changes, maybe even through an error or something of that nature, that's a huge issue.
But I don't really see why it should be sent by the cloud itself. I mean, it would be sent by the applications running in the cloud rather. So I mean, for this picture, for example, if you would have some CI service running in AWS that uses Tecton and Kepton, for example, then this would be more what happens. It's more on the application layer that these events are sent, and not on the infrastructure, the cloud provider layer itself.
Oh yeah, I mean, So sorry.
So when I say we talk about,
yeah, when I say customers, actually, so this is actually kind of a different semantic meaning than what most people are used to. So back at AWS, when we say customers, we literally mean anyone that uses the product, and that might be even internally. So this like if, and for instance, service A, service B, like these are like person that service B that uses our service A, that's our customer, right? Even though it's all internal to like AWS or Apple. So if you're changing that, that's a huge deal. If that's what you were trying to say there.
No, I don't think that it will change anything. I mean, of course, if you deploy an application on AWS, those applications could use whatever interfaces externally to send messages or RPC calls or whatever towards other services in the same cluster or some other cluster. And AWS, I guess, don't care about that too much. Of course, there can be restrictions on firewalls and such, but I mean, those messages are on an application layer more, and not in the cloud infrastructure itself. I'm still confused how that could be anyway relevant to the CDEvents discussion.
Well, I mean, like these services would probably want to use CDEvents, no? Like these cloud providers eventually. That was my thinking, because that's how
to deliver them the software for the cloud itself. Maybe I mean AWS software in the production of what should you call it, software production of AWS software itself, but not within the cloud itself as such. But I mean, if the software for AWS was produced through some kind of CI tool, say it was produced through Jenkins or Sept.
Yeah, that's where the confusion is, because like when I was talking, I'll go to AWS because that's what we're talking about. So AWS has its own set of series of CI/CD tools, and that's what I was talking about. And these CI/CD tools again are all internal. They are not forks or anything. So like, for first they would need to get the plugins in there, and then figure out, how to change all these payloads or headers, to support, and then get interoperability with like maybe other CI/CD type things. Like for instance, if code build wanted to support this, then maybe it could interface with now the internal Amazon CD section of it. Because that's kind of the vision that I'm seeing, right? But the biggest issue here is, again, if you're changing the payload, that I don't see that happening. One, because security is a big part of it, but also the potential of not knowing what the translator is going to do. So this is more of an argument against of using something in front of it, or in front of the services, like a translator, for instance.
Okay. Yeah. So what you say now is that AWS, for example, uses their own proprietary solutions as CI/CD tools for their own software. So they don't use like Jenkins or Tekton and anything like that. They have their own homegrown stuff. Yeah. But but you say that they might be interested in CDEvents because they want to use some common visualization that is, or metrics collector or traceability thing or whatever orchestrator outside, or that is generic, and I can listen to the AWS internal CI/CD pipelines then.
Well, the one thing. Yeah, so the one thing at AWS that was a major pain point is actually getting AWS to work well with internal the internal tools, as weird as that sounds. So like, for instance, if you can now to get code build to actually run as the CI portion of this like pipeline that does CI and CD was very difficult to do in AWS, because the payload and the events, there was no standardization right there, right? So they had to write these like adapters and plugins just to support this. But as AWS, like new tools new services are constantly coming out, like with CloudWatch and whatnot, and to support any of these services, they have to spend time and develop it. But if they were using something like CDEvents, it should just be able to be dropped in, right? I mean, that's the goal.
That is the goal, right?
Yeah.
So I have to jump. I think this is a great discussion. Could we, instead of moving it to a Slack, could we just create a discussion in our GitHub project? on this?
Oh, sure. As an issue?
I think it's a better place for these kinds of discussions. And the other thing that I just want to point out is security is an interesting topic right now, obviously. But one of the things that I'm hearing where people are starting to say, hey, maybe we should be looking at an event-based CD platform is the fact that so many people are not including the generation of SBOMs through their process, and they're looking at having to update so many workflows.
Yes.
So I just want to make sure I think this is a great discussion to have, and thank you for bringing it up. But what I think we need to keep in mind is that we are disrupting this process, and we need to continue disrupting it because the way we do it now doesn't work. And there is, you have to be brave to walk into a new world and say, this is the better way to do it. And it might require a lot of work, but it'll take you a lot farther in the long run. And I think that that's the goal of CDEvents, is to really fix the problem and not patch it. So that would be my concern, is that we're trying to dumb down the events process to patch it.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely, I like that call out. And that's definitely not what I want to do. I don't want to patch it. But I also want it to be useful for, for things like AWS and Apple. But the question is, how do you get those things in there? And maybe that discussion, though, that GitHub issue will help with that. So yeah, I'll definitely do that later in the day. I got another meeting after this, so but I'll definitely do that. I'll start that.
There might even be an issue we can continue discussing in. If I remember correctly, I think Andrea wrote an issue about this, but it might have been canceled or something, but I'm not sure.
The sad thing about this conversation is this is exactly the kind of conversations it would be great to have publicly.
To get more use cases.
We do all of I'm doing CDF meetups. We finally are starting those again. And we always just do we just talk at people as opposed to having a discussion. I would love to be able to do something like this in a CDF meetup, that this is just going to be a discussion on how CDEvents should be built. And we can have a discussion like this publicly, because there's so much learning to be done. I've learned a lot in the last 15 minutes. So thank you for bringing this up, Ben.
Yeah, no problem. And, thank you for the push, because like I said, it's hard, when you're, trying to bring up an issue, like an Apple, for instance, or in AWS, everyone's going to just kind of agree with you because they're all in the same mindset. But bringing it here and then getting that pushback is going to really help flesh this out and hopefully be for the better, right, for CDEvents. So that's kind of the goal here, for me at least.
Yeah, exactly. How do we make it easy to adopt? But I don't think that we're going to be able to make it easy to adopt and not disrupt at the same time.
And one idea is, of course, that you should be able to not just interoperate between systems, but also replace systems without, if you would replace the consumer of these events or the information, say a visualization thing, you shouldn't need to replace the producer of the event as well at the same time, because they should understand the same information in the same format. So I'm a little bit concerned if we have a lot of payload that is currently sent in these events within AWS in those proprietary solutions between those, and then we somehow switch out the whatever orchestrator to Tecton or something in that system, and then all of a sudden the consumers of that information would require Tecton to produce some new payload that Tecton is not used to, just because the old system did. And then we have misunderstood the idea with CDEvents, I believe, if we go that way.
And we end up with a patchwork of stuff that just doesn't sustain in the long run.
So the events should be as small as possible, I would say, with just the needed properties in them. And then there could be custom data, but those shouldn't be considered by the consumers unless they are very much aware of the producers of that data. But regardless,
guys, I got to jump to an Artilius meeting, so I will chat soon, and I'll watch that discussion. I'm looking forward to that discussion. Actually,
right, awesome. Well, yeah, thanks for challenging it again, Tracy. I've always really appreciated it. So, but yeah.
So Ben, please, if you write an issue, Ben, you can please add it to the protocol here as well, so we have it in. Oh, sorry, to the documentation here.
Oh, perfect. Okay,
we have it here. I'll write it.
Hi,
like
guys.
this. Hello. Bye.
And ladies, Kara's on here.
Yeah.
Bye, Clancy.
So I think the best place to write this issue is on this in the CDEvents spec repo, like there. See if we will be able to write that issue, Ben. There, we can continue the discussion there.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah, I'll go ahead and do that later today.
Perfect. Thanks again for bringing it up. And sorry for not understanding in exactly
Oh no, that's my bad, because like I always
no
think that people have the same context as me, like knowing all this information, but I'm like, no, why would they know this? So yeah, but yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. So let's see, we are still everyone left. Yeah. So action items from last time, we had a action on Andrea, or he actually made the Solgi action in a way about documenting the subscriber model. So the action is not, or the documentation is not written, but there is an issue for it now. I believe this one should be added to the project. So we added to 0.1 as well. This is actually very much needed, I would say. So it's clarified what the events are intended for. So I will add that to this project here. And also to the milestone 0.1. So we have it there. Yep. That action is done then, and visible should be. So SDK features, that's another thing we should document. What are the general features required by any SDK that is supposed to be compatible with CDEvents? And examples of such things we should add to those requirements are what kind of coverage when it comes to unit tests it will be needed by the SDKs. Should there be conformance tests towards the schemas for the CDEvents? And they should pin the specific version of the specification in the SDK as well, so it's clear what version is supported. So these and maybe other things should be added as well for SDKs that are supposed or saying to be compatible with CDEvents. And this should also be in the 0.1 version. No, why didn't I get 0.1 here now?
Wait,
another repo.
When do we plan on how far away are we? I guess are we plan on releasing like a tag for the Go SDK, just out of curiosity, or is that still pretty far out?
The idea is that 0.1 should be announced during the CD summit in Detroit.
Oh, cool. Okay, awesome.
So not so very far away, but it all depends on, of course, if we can all help out to make it possible.
Yeah, definitely.
So here we have the board currently for the 0.1 release. There are a lot of things to do here, and quite few things that are assigned to people, and also those assigned to people are not always in progress. I have some which I haven't progressed too much on. So I would hope that we get more help from people on this call or another way to help out with these.
Yeah, I've tried. I'll talk to my manager again, but like the problem with Apple is they're like so finicky with touching like anything like code wise open source. So but I'm gonna keep pushing for it. I've been trying to get approval, but once I get approval, I will definitely help out, and I'll let you guys know when I do.
Yeah. Because of course we want to have this announced during KubeCon then, or CD Summit, but of course it depends if we can manage. And there is not just this. I mean, we have the administration is here. We need to do the announcement itself with some blog post with it probably, and PR document and such things. And that is not just done in a quarter either. So and there are some not too many things in the actual spec to be added. I think the major big things are there now. I saw that there are a few things related to the DORA metrics. I'm not sure, Eric, if you've discussed this more with Andrea, because this seems to not be assigned and not started. What is the scope and the extension of these? So how much is this really?
So I think Andrea has actually done quite a bit of the work for changes, for artifacts, and for services. He has in the Go SDK done a few updates that he realized was needed to be able to produce these metrics. So it's
So these are probably ongoing in some sense then by Andrea.
Yeah, it is ongoing. I'm not sure if I should call it a substantial change or a small change. I think Andrea would be better to answer that, but changes definitely, yes.
Mm-hmm. Understand. So I think this might look like a lot, but then some things might actually be ongoing even though it's not visible here.
Yeah. The incident events, though, are not started yet, but so that's probably a bigger thing that we need to work on.
Yeah, because we have said that we want to be able to support the DORA metrics fully or as much as feasible with the 0.1 version, but it might be so also that we have something that is not part of it. So say we can provide 3 out of 4 metrics or something.
Yeah,
that could also be a way to handle it, of course, but preferably we should have support for all of them. Yeah, I don't intend to go through all of these different topics, but you're free, of course, to volunteer to take on any of these actions or tickets to work on them. Anyway, those are the issue created, and we have discussed. Sorry, the spec changes you already said. Talk about that now. And this is what we talked about as well. So we have the change and the artifact events here. There are some updates already in Andrea's work. Yeah, which will eventually be provided through pull requests to the spec itself. Well, I think we've covered then what is part of the agenda here. Is anything else on your mind that we should use this time for then that remains? Or should we try instead to spend the 20 minutes on actually trying to do something about all these issues we have ourselves?
Actually, I don't have too much. So yeah, like I'd vote to because that gives me 20 minutes to write the issue, so that'd be perfect.
Yeah.
Can I ask Ben a question actually?
Sure.
Okay, so if the CDEvents was moved to mostly passing information by metadata, is that what you're suggesting?
Well, no, it's mostly how it's being passed. So right now it's a payload, like it touches the body, which is a huge issue because, like, for example, like there's some services like we can't even see the payload. So getting approval for like a translator or anything to touch that payload is like a really big deal internally. So that's like one potential issue. But you know, like there might be solutions there. But the thing is yeah, just touching that body is generally a big no-no for from the past companies that I've worked at. One, worrying about breaking change. Two, worrying about, what are they going to be doing with that metrics? How's security, because like getting security approval back at AWS would take years, like it takes a very long time. And then my experience here at Apple, also very, very long time. So if this is something that we want to use, it's the adoption seems really, really, like the barrier to entry for these type of companies makes it very, very high. which I don't see these companies wanting to use it. If that's the case, is more of my concern there.
Probably that they would need some big benefits to get from it in the directly. And that could be DORA metrics, or it could be visualizations, or it could be something else, maybe. But there need to be huge benefits, I see, to be able to allow such changes internally, sure. But I also think that even though there might be a lot of information sent in these messages today,
it's my concern.
Might not be so that they all, I mean, the exact information that we need for the CDEvents might not be through one single of those messages. There could be a combination of them, or in between some of them, or whatever. So I still think adding another channel for these events sounds to me like a more
practical way.
Yeah, actually, but then of course all senders of these events, either all senders need to send the CDEvents as well, or there needs to be some acceptable consumer of the current data that can just consume
like
certain
service almost
part of it, or something that is okay from security perspective to also propagate through CDEvents.
Does that answer your question, Cara?
Yeah, it does a bit. I guess I'm just trying to figure out, like, just to get closer to, and I'm thinking of more concrete example. So like, if you look at other messaging, just like gRPC, the metadata is opaque to gRPC itself. So let's the client provide information to the server and vice versa, but like associated with the call. But is that what would that enable CDEvents to be then used more?
Yeah, so to kind of give the why that works is because that's chosen up front typically, or like when you're creating a new API, you can choose it to be gRPC, or you can make it, potentially additive if they wanted to do that. But typically people don't just add gRPC. I mean, some people do, but I've never seen it internally where people just like, let's just add gRPC on top of it when, the current encoding works fine. So that's the biggest issue, is like, because since you're just starting, you can choose it to be gRPC. So if this was a new service that was coming out of like Apple or AWS, perfect, we can use CDEvents. But the problem is, if it's only this one service, how useful is that, Sorry, did that make sense?
Yeah. By this one service, what do you mean by that exactly? Sorry.
Okay, so when you're choosing, so like I'll go like you're choosing like your payload, let's say like your payload encoding. So we're choosing JSON up front, right? That's similar, like we're choosing gRPC up front, right? There's no breaking changes there. There's no contracts. There's really nothing, right? So like this new service now can just start sending CDEvents, and sending, whatever encoding in whatever format, because that's chosen up front. They didn't make any promises to any other services, or, and this is assuming that security is fine with this, right? But that's the biggest thing, is, not making any promises to all these other services saying that this is what this payload looks like.
Okay.
Yeah, because now, well, like I said, and then, like imagine, you're the same service, and you're like, oh, we're going to change from JSON to XML. That's a huge issue, right? But I mean, it's not the same, because you're not going that far, but just kind of give you an idea why that might be somewhat of an issue somewhere, right?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Cool. So I think that's all I had. And then I'm going to try attending the other meeting that you posted, Emil. Like, that's on a Wednesday, but it's like 4 a.m. my time, so that might be a little bit harder.
Yeah, it's a bit hard, yeah. So that's next Wednesday. But of course, we could have ad hoc meetings as well if we need to discuss this in any more detail. I'm pretty sure we won't have any such header handling of or putting data into headers as part of 0.1, but for sure we can look into it for 0.2 then. I mean, we try to get something out now as quick as possible, and it seems to be needing some more discussions before we can.
Definitely. And then Emil, and I think maybe and like I said, this is just an idea, like saying headers is, but if we go a totally different route, like you were suggesting, like maybe we just need a service that handles these, that's fine too. But I just want to make sure that that's outlined in the spec. So when companies like my company, Apple or AWS is looking at this, they're like, okay, they handle this use case. We're okay with this, So that's kind of more of my concern, right?
Yeah, but maybe that's then what we should try to do for 0.1 even. Add just a short paragraph or a couple of paragraphs around that then for the use case itself. You can mention that in your issue as well if you like, and even provide a proposition or a proposal on how to formulate that in a good way. I think that would help a lot and will decrease the confusion.
For sure.
For people having the same use cases in mind as you have now. Yeah, that would be great actually. So please don't spend the next 14 minutes on writing that issue.
All right, awesome.
if we stop the meeting now.
Okay, awesome. All right, well, thanks meeting everyone. So I'll see you either the next SIG or the 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, perfect. So any other comments from anyone else, or we can close the meeting?
I think we can close. It's been good discussions.
Yeah. Thank you all. And see you next time.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.